What is up, beautiful people? Keanu barely made that. That was
Oh, I
that
ain't
was
barely make it. I made it right on time. I was planned, homie. Don't disrespect me.
it was beautiful timing. I love it.
I've been practicing.
It was good. It was good. What's up, guys? We're talking about a really interesting topic today. Is the media controlled? And like what's happening with the Olympics, what's happening with the outages, all this good stuff. Kihano, I'm going to leave you to the lead since I feel like you know more about this than me. I sent that one YouTube video that like I showed to me is like, okay, there's definitely some control stuff. You and I are probably going to disagree why, but yeah, man, but I'm here to learn. I mean, this is a topic I'm much more open about than, Trump, which we've been doing for the past 2 weeks. So I'm open to hear it. This was one I could be probably convinced on.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I think that's kind of the cool thing about the way we discuss things in a podcast. I think both of us are going to come to certain conversations with preconceived ideas as to what we think is really going on. But I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that we come with just questions more than answers, and maybe we come to those answers here. Maybe we get educated by some of the people who join us on the podcast, and they give us perspective. And I think that for me, maybe not for you, because it seems like you're a little bit more set in certain topics. What's up, Robert? How's everything going, man? But for me, I think a big part of it, bro, is like, even if I come to this with a preconceived idea, I'm open to be, educated. I'm open to have my mind changed. I think that's how you grow. I think that's really how you grow as a human being, and that's how you learn. And so I think that's the cool thing about the conversations that we have, because maybe you educate me, right? This Trump guy, a lot of times, a lot of guys, that we've been talking about this Trump debate. Is he a dictator? Which we're gonna have. I actually partially requested a delay on that because I didn't have enough time to do the research I needed to do to keep up with the stuff that Jonah presented. He presented some compelling information that I want to make sure.
It was good research. No, we don't have to talk about it, but that was I'm just gonna say it wasn't badly done.
No, it wasn't. You know what's interesting to me?
It would have been hilarious if you're like, no, it's dog shit, bro. It was terrible. It was all fake news.
You know what's interesting to me about that, bro? The most interesting part to me is how little information is out there on the topic as compared to other topics. If you Google 9/11, and I'm using 9/11 because 9/11 by some politicians was what was used as a comparison to the January 6th situation. People compare January 6th, 9/11. All right, whatever. Cool. Well, if I Google 9/11 right now, bro, I'm going to get pages of information about an event that happened over 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago. January 6th, handful of years ago, can't get anything. The information out there is minimal at best. That, for me, raises its own set of questions, which is part of the reason why I didn't want to just be willy-nilly with my response. I want to make sure I'm being thorough, because when I see that leads to conclusions, and I don't want to go based on assumptions, but I think that's really what good research comes down to. That's what good conversations come down to. My opinion, Jonah, and we go into talking about today, I think I was in one of my coaching calls today for my sales community, and we were talking about this earlier on a different topic. It had to do with business and a little bit of health stuff. And the conclusion that I came to, that I discussed there, is the conclusion that I have when it comes to a lot of stuff. I think that our lives are our responsibility. Jonah, your health, your responsibility. It's not your doctor's responsibility. That's your responsibility. Not your mom, not your dad. It's yours. Our income financially and how we choose to provide for ourselves, our responsibility. I also think the way we navigate in the world that we live in, the way we educate ourselves about the world in which we live, I think that's our responsibility. We can't pawn that off on anybody else. The interesting part is most people are comfortable doing that, and they don't even realize they're doing it. We live in a world where we don't ask questions. We just assume we live in this rosy, perfect world that has its problems, but everything's going to be fine. Don't have to worry about it. And I don't know if that's that simple. And the question I think is raised by some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is, are we naive by sitting in cruise control, assuming that the world that we live in, let's just call it the United States, is just fine? We don't have to worry about covering ourselves. We don't have to worry about looking out for contingencies. It's just fine. We shouldn't ask questions, and we can just coast on cruise control. Or are we being naive by saying that? And should we really start taking an honest look at the world that we live in and ask ourselves, is America as we know it as safe as we think it is? Are our freedoms as safe as we think they are? And do we think that Do we think that 10 years from now, things are going to be as good as they are today? Or do we need to start planning for just in case? And I think that is going to be a part of what we go into today. Before we go into the topics, because we're going to talk about a lot of things, what are your thoughts on that, bro? Should we be in cruise control? Are we good? We're in the United States. We're fine. Just get a job, cover your money. You'll be good. These are the ups and downs. Or are we reaching the point where America's
Here's
really in
how
danger?
I feel. Here's my feelings on this. America, I love America. I think we got this. We have problems that are unprecedented by far. If I feel like as long as we can stay together and not kill each other, that's the biggest thing I'm worried about, is us killing each other over like politics and other BS. I think we can solve anything. Only 80 years ago, we were fighting Nazis and like communists, right? Like truly evil regimes that have like passed over, not fully, not all of them, but a lot of them have passed away from the earth, right? What we're dealing with now, yes, it's unprecedented. I don't know if you believe, I actually don't have no idea what you feel about climate change, but climate change is an issue, right? Whether we can get through politics, these are issues, right? But if you take it into like perspective historically, like we are doing so freaking well. It would be so stupid.
Interesting. That's an interesting perspective.
It would be so dumb. We might blow ourselves up in the most stupid way possible, which is also very American. But I truly am like, dude, we have so many advantages, and like we could make the sickest place on earth. And I'm optimistic. In the end, I believe in humans. We have a lot of problems, but we've dealt with crazy stuff in the past. Right? Every generation has its potential world-ending scenarios. You know, so I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I'm optimistic.
That's really interesting. So then here's my question to you. Here's my question that I throw back to you. And that question is, if you look at through the years, look at Rome, look at all of these different nations that have been around, there is this underlying understanding that there's a time limit, right? They're like Rome had a certain amount of time. All of these great nations had X amount of time before they crumbled upon themselves. The United States is in that exact same time window and is encountering the exact same issues politically that many of these major cultures throughout the world in our world history encountered before their collapse, using ancient Rome as a prevalent example. A lot of people have pointed out, and we don't have to go into that because there's books, there's a lot of different conversations surrounding this topic. Do you think that there's any truth to that? Is there any merit to the fact that we've reached that same time frame? We're encountering the same issues. Is America preparing itself for a collapse like these major nations in our history have as well?
Well, if you use Rome as an example, we're not Rome, first off. Society is very different. It's not fully comparable. America's sort of an empire-ish, like not in the same way, right? Our democracy might end, just like Roman democracy might end.
Okay.
Roman democracy, Roman republicanism lasted about 300 years. We're getting there with America. We're at about 300 years. Rome lasted another 500 years after that, though. Like, I mean, shit was lit under the empire, you know? Like, I just like clipped that one, Gianmarco. But like in terms of, we might lose the republic, which would be very unfortunate.
The way you just nonchalantly throwing this out there, bro, like what does that mean, right? What does that mean in your head?
Really bad, right? I'm not saying it would be good. I see more parallels with that than anything else, but also our system of government is better, in my opinion. I think it's more thought out than the Roman Republican government. Like, they were based on generals. We don't like follow generals, right? Generally, I hope that most people are for the rule of law. I think we are. We could get into that. I see yes and no on the left and the right, right? It's hard. there are things we're dealing with that the collapse of Rome had to deal with, and there are things that we're doing 10 times better at, right? So like a lot of the monetary stuff we're dealing with, a lot of the issues with republicanism we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lot of military expenditure, right? But there's other things that we have that's going for us too, in the sense of like how we're seen on the world stage, and like I think our system of government works better than the Roman system of government. We don't have slavery. They had slaves, and that was like actually a huge issue as well. So like there's some merit to it, but I don't
the
know.
nature of the fact that you're kind of nonchalantly throwing out there, yeah, like maybe the republic comes to an end. Like in that example, what? Because this is a whole conversation we can have, maybe a different day. But what replaces us? What replaces a republic, right? If you will, what replaces democratic rule if the United States goes a different direction?
It would be bad. I'm not going to sit here and say it would be good. It would be very bad. It would be probably a dictatorship of some sort, right? I mean, like we're in the modern day. That's the same thing as an emperor, more or less. It's just the modern version of it. Yeah, it wouldn't be good. It would be some sort of dictator, right? I have my opinions about which side is going to bring in a dictatorship more likely than the other. But yeah, so there's all sorts of different things that we're dealing with if you want to like compare us to Rome. But there are other things we don't have to deal with. America is surrounded by 2 oceans, right? In the end, if we absolutely needed to, we could say, sorry, world, suck it. We're going to just defend ourselves and everyone else can figure it the fuck out. Reduce the military budget to like 100 billion and be like, we're just defending our shores. Everyone else can figure their own stuff out. That'd be really bad for the world, but America could figure it out, right? Like in the end, I think it's more likely it's either going to be a dictatorship or it's going to be kind of like what happened with the Brits, you know, where it's like a slow ease out, you know, like where they kind of like the British don't like collapse or anything, but their empire just slowly dissolved, you know, like over time. Those are our 2 fortunes, I would say. I don't know which one's going to happen, but yeah, that's a very interesting question. Not really much that isn't related to the media. How does that relate to the media controlling us, though?
You know, I actually think this is a very great lead in to what we're talking about today, because what we have here, so I look at things differently than a lot of people. I share a different perspective, I guess. When I look at things, I don't look at it from the perspective of what's just happening right now. I think that's a reactive way to look at it. I don't just ask what's happening, I ask why. So what's the big thing? So we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about some of the stuff about the media that seems questioning. But then the question that I ask immediately, and we'll show this here in a minute, is, okay, cool. If this is happening, this is very interesting, but why?
Wait, can I flip the question on you too? Like, since you asked me,
yeah, 100%.
What do you think about America? What do you think America's future is?
I think there's 2 eventualities. In one world, we are living in a society that is driven by our current political landscape, by the freedoms that were granted to us by our forefathers and the founding members of this nation. And we have the opportunity, the privilege, and the right as citizens to stand up and defend this nation and push towards the original fundamental ideas on which it was founded, which means that you, me, by voting, by advocating, by using a platform like this, growing it and having a voice, we can influence change in our network, in this nation. And as a result, we live in a world that, even though it's rocky right now, 15 years from now, everything's turned around because strong people stood up and used their voice the right way to affect change. I think that's one option. Now, under that scenario, it could also go the other way. The negative voices could win, and we could end up making a strong left. But I just don't think that's the world that we live in. I don't think we live in a world that is governed by our policies. I think we live in a world that we're told that we're governed by policies. But I think that the reality is we live in a world that's controlled by people with money, with a specific agenda. And I think that agenda has been playing out for millennia, for generations. And I believe that we are just a small piece in a much bigger puzzle. And I think that we do have the ability to impact and affect change to a small degree, but the likelihood of that change playing out and winning over a plan that's been going on for generations is unlikely. I think that this was all supposed to plan out. And I think that under that example, it's our responsibility to do our best to operate as if that was our chance and do our best to impact change and affect change the way we want to, but also recognize that if the shit hits the fan, push comes to shove, and it doesn't play out the way we want, we got to be able to defend ourselves, stand up for ourselves. We got to be able to provide for ourselves. Make sure you got enough food to handle the situations that get tough. Make sure you're able to, sustain yourself when things get bad. I think that's a more likely reality. I would love that it's not. I hope I'm wrong in that. And I'm going to build as if there is a possibility.
You're using a lot of like very vague languaging. Do you mean like apocalyptic type of stuff?
I mean, that's a strong word for it, but for lack of a more demure word, yeah, I would say apocalyptic. I would say like we're like tough. Stuff gets tough, and you got to defend your land. And your neighbors that used to be your friends might be coming and try to take your stuff from you. I think that's and here's the thing: in the United States, there are people who rolled their eyes and thought I'm crazy, and that just shows how naive you are with your little comfortable American thing. That the worst thing you've had to worry about in life is that your soy latte wasn't hot enough. Bro, in the rest of this planet, there are people this is their reality today. Like today, there are other parts of the world where today, this is their reality. Where today, they have to be concerned if a bomb goes off next to their house. And that wasn't their problem 5 years ago. Are we this naive to think that that can't happen in America? Like, you got to be naive to think that that's not possible. Whether it's probable or not is a different question. But it's possible, and you're naive to not think that those things can happen on your shores.
It's definitely possible, and I definitely agree that like Americans definitely are insulated and just don't understand what's happening in the rest of the world a lot of the times. Yeah. I don't know if it'll get to bunker level. It'd be so interesting because like I feel like the things that would make it bunker level are things that I bet you don't believe in. Like I bet you don't believe in climate change, or I don't know, but like based on our conversations, I have no idea. But like based on the side,
here's a fantastic question for you though. But that is the best way to propose.
We're gonna really get off topic though.
Yeah, but I think it plays into what we're talking about today, right? So here's my question to you, right? And just for the context, I love Jasper. Jasper lives under what I believe the naive reality that the government actually has your best interest at heart and you should trust them. And that's fine. He believes that, and so he mocks my perspective on these things. But he's not going to be the only one. Now, Jasper doesn't have that high of an IQ, so you can take his perspective with a grain of salt. But other people with high IQs probably disagree with me as well.
You're in a mood today, dude. Like, wait, God damn, Jesus, what the hell? What you take today, bro? What meds are you taking? I want some.
For context, it's not love. Jasper knows how we get down.
I know, but like,
I'll send you something.
You're going off today, dude.
Nah, but here's where it is. So you say you don't know that we're gonna get to bunker level. That's fair. Here's my question to you: why are so many billionaires building bunkers then?
Billionaires have dude. If you're a billionaire, you got nothing better to do, bro. You're just building bunkers. You're just like, dude. Have you seen the shit billionaires do? They do such crazy shit. No, they own tigers and stuff, dog. Billionaires have tigers. They have like. Those guys just like are like I'd buy things just fucking cuz it's like look at my bunker just in case.
You are not this stupid, Jonah. You are not this stupid. Stop it right now.
Right, you answer me. Why do billionaires have tigers?
Multiple billionaires have decided to simultaneously begin building end time level bunkers because tigers.
No, not because tigers. I'm saying that billionaires do crazy stuff all the time.
Yeah, I understand that's the reasoning, but
I don't know if they're all like you can show me. I don't keep up with what billionaires are doing. If you can show me that they all are now just now, everyone's building a bunker right now, specifically, that would be concerning to me. I'd be like, okay, what's going on? If everyone just has a bunker whenever they get it, just cause, that's one thing. It'd be one thing if everyone built it in like the last month, like not if it last month, but like if everyone built it at like around the same time, that would be concerning. Yeah. So like I don't that's a little different than just having a bunker.
No,
I don't know anything about this. That's all I'm gonna say.
So I hear you, but here's what's interesting about you and I, right? And that's why I really do enjoy the fact that we have this conversation, because we're so far apart. My propensity to ask more questions is the equivalent to your propensity to just assume it's fine. Oh, it's fine. And for you think I'm crazy for reading into it too much. I think you're naive for just assuming that everybody's best interest at heart. Like multiple billionaires in the same year started building bunkers. Well, billionaires are billionaires.
If you say the same year, that actually is worth questioning. I didn't know it was in the same year. Like this is something you'd have to show me. This is not something I've seen. If I thought you were just talking about them having bunkers and shit, like in general. If like all of a sudden there are tons of billionaires building bunkers all in the same year, that's a little concerning. I agree. That is somewhat concerning.
Yeah. I'm trying
having a bunker as a billionaire, to me, if it's just one billionaire, is the equivalent of one billionaire having like a tiger, though. Like it's like it doesn't prove anything unless like there's like a pattern, right? You know?
Yeah. So The Guardian, let's see if this pulls it up. I'm just trying to find it. I didn't prepare. If I can't find it here, we'll move on.
It's okay. Like we don't have to talk about it too long. It's just like that. Like that wasn't originally what you said, right? So that would be interesting if they all built it in the same year, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Marco said something. Oracle founder Larry Ellison purchased almost all of the Hawaiian island Lanai. Yes, their vast estates do include bunkers and other technologies traditionally associated with prepping. Okay. I believe it. Honestly, if I had $1 billion, I'd probably build one too, right? Like, wouldn't you build one if you had $1 billion?
Okay, so to be clear, 1,000,000%. But I'm questioning why. Why would you build? Because I know why I would build one. Because I think there's a great possibility all of this stuff is going to get burnt to the ground.
I mean, like, dude, people fucking hate billionaires. I'd build it for A, if there's end time stuff that you're worried about, or B, just like, dude, somebody just breaking into my mansion or some shit, you know? I gotta go somewhere to hide.
This is a very Ashley answer right here, and I believe this 1,000,000,000%. Why did you build a bunker? Because I just wanted to mess with conspiracy theorists. That would be Ashley.
That would be really funny. That would be really funny.
Yeah, man. So like I think that we live in a world that we're being naive if we think that everything's going to be hunky-dory forever. There was many a time in this nation in the not too distant past where people were shooting each other on the ground in this country, where we were in extreme turmoil. Yeah, but this is just correct. But I'm talking about from in the middle of a war. In the world today, there are actual wars. There are people who live in this country who have escaped other countries who were in war. You're an idiot if you think that war can't touch the United States. You just are. Now, I think that for me is why you need to be prepared. So when you ask me the question, I think that I think that for the longest time, there's the United States was never planned to be a nation that was the world's strongest independent nation forever. I think there is a global agenda where they want to make a one world government. I think that has been in play for a very long time. I think that that's still in play. And I think that what we play out in the grand scheme of things, if you go back the last 20, 50 plus years, you can see a very clear plan pushing us towards that end. I think that's where we're going. Here's the problem. To succeed in accomplishing that, if that's right, which could be crazy, maybe I'm wrong. I could be an idiot. If that's true, though, Jonah, America can't be America anymore. You have to destabilize this nation to the point that it has to rely on a global government. And it's the destabilization part that we're not talking about. What does that look like? How does that play out? What happens to the everyday Joes and Jolinas or whatever in this country that still live here? These are real concerns. And that for me is what I think we should be aware of. My opinion, could be wrong.
Okay. I'm not saying like that's a like necessarily like a stupid opinion or anything like that. Like I don't know anything about a world government. Like I have never heard that before. I'm gonna be real. I've never heard that they were trying to make a world government before. So this is just kind of like, okay, tell me about it. Like what? Like this is more. I'm more uneducated on this. Sounds kind of crazy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that would achieve having one world government, right? But yeah, that's like what my question would be. Like, why would we want a world government? For more power? Like so that elites can have more power over us? Would they even have more powers over us? Would that even work? Right? I don't know.
I think that, Birdie, what is going on, lady? I think that this deserves its own podcast. If you want to do a podcast surrounding this, we definitely can. I think that there is actually a huge amount of evidence, United States presidents talking about this over the course of the years. Politically, geopolitically, I don't know, Jasper. But if you were in a position of power and you were a part of the extremely small number of families who have been ruling this nation for generations, well, that would be an extremely powerful. For the people up at the top, the powerful families, there's an obvious set of value in us having global control and a global government. Everything gets filtered up to one place. It's the top of the pyramid, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And you're not just the top of a pyramid of a bunch of different little nations or 10 or 20 nations. You're a top of the pyramid of the entire world. And everything is controlled under one global rule. If you think back to rulers, Napoleon, all of the rulers in the past, most great rulers, Alexander the Great, didn't want to rule a couple countries. They wanted to rule the world. You think that desire has stopped from people who were seeking global domination, right? Once again, we're naive to think that everybody on the planet just wants to go and get a job and cover their bills. There are people who are hungry enough that they want to rule the world. That has not gone away, and we're naive to think that it has. The difference is, unlike 500 years ago, there is the logistical capacity to actually pull this off, unlike there ever has been in history. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, so if we really took the time to break it down, and Jonah, if you want, we can definitely do a podcast. What's the globalist agenda? Is it real or is it fake? Like, we can do a whole podcast around that, because there is a clear set of evidence and examples that lead me to believe that this is what they've been trying to lay out for the longest time. My opinion. Let's see. But wouldn't all of those families want the control to themselves? But now they're willing to work together. I mean, I think that
Keanu's not invited to a meeting, Jasper. Get the fuck over it, okay? Like, he's not gonna know the specific inter-family dynamics. Come on, dog.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really interesting. So, yes, also, do me a favor, Jonah. Spend 48 hours trying to have a normal, educated conversation with Jasper. You'll understand the
I do want to say something, like, in terms of like global elites and stuff. This one, I'm more on your side. I used to work at the Bohemian Grove. I don't know if people know what that is, but there were people like Conan and shit there, and there were like celebrities that would go, and then we were restricted to certain areas, but you'd like see certain things outside of the trucks. It was crazy. It was wild. I was like, wow, what are they doing out there?
You are not, Jonah, you are not about to just drop the fact that you worked at the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah. It's like 20 miles from where I live. I like stayed with a friend, and
we just officially became a conspiracy podcast. Jasper, strap in, bro. You're about to get educated, dog. Okay. First of all, Jasper doesn't know what this is. Like, you understand the significance of the Bohemian Grove having worked there, I'm assuming. Right, Jonah?
It was crazy. It was kind of wild how restricted we were. I was like, this is weird. We were like I'll give a little bit of what we did. You'd show up to a place, they'd van you in, right? They'd make sure like you only see forest. You get to like the restaurants, and then you'd work, and you just work at the restaurants, and it'd be like, why are like old white rich people just going to summer camp together? Like it was really weird. It's like, what would attract like Conan and like Clint Eastwood. Those were the two famous people who I served food to at this place, and I'm like, Clint Eastwood and Conan O'Brien.
Okay.
And I was just like, I just don't understand what they're doing all day. Like, it's weird. Like, I wouldn't want to go to this. It is no women at all. It's all dudes. They're all rich. Oh, also, there was like another reporter there too. I forgot his name. He was like an MSNBC reporter. I forgot. It was just strange. I was like, what? Why are you guys here? Is this like where you guys like have sex with like whores to get away from your wives? Like, I just don't get it. So it was really weird. So like I've looked up, I saw like the, what was it? The Alex Jones video of them like costuming up and like praying to an owl god. It's some weird stuff. Like, I'm like, I could be much more convinced that global elites are trying to control shit than, but I like when we were talking about Trump, I just don't believe Trump isn't part of that personally. So, but like, that's beside, we don't have to go back to Trump, but like,
yeah,
it was weird. It was pretty weird. And it was weird how like we were very restricted. We could only go to certain areas. We were like, if we weren't in one of our areas, we were constantly escorted. So it was a weird time.
Couple of things. One, I hope Jasper's still listening. Two, I'm definitely going to turn you into a conspiracy theorist, Jonah. Like, I need you to go and buy a package of industrial sized tinfoil because you about to be hatted up in your house, homie. I got you. Don't worry.
Sure.
But
it was weird. So like, I've seen weird things like that. And I showed you we could show the video that I found too about like the media and like have it like, I think the media thing, which we should actually get into the topic. I think that's mostly what's caused, my opinion of why the media is controlled is you literally look it up. Almost all the news stations are owned, I think, by like 5 companies.
Yep.
How many companies own the news? It's like 5 or even 3. Like, hold on, own the news. 90% of the media is owned by 50 companies. No, that was 37 years ago. Today, 6 companies. Let me show my screen. So this is why I think the media is controlled, right? Is there's no competition. So the media is owned by 6 companies: Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. And that's basically it. They own everything, right? And like 37 years ago, 50 companies owned it.
Yeah, but have you done the math as to when you break that down into even smaller numbers, what that looks like? How many people that is? It's like 3 companies. It's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. You know who owns State Street? BlackRock and Vanguard. You know who owns Vanguard?
So they just all own each other.
All own each other, and then they own everything up top, bro. Like, it gets really, really crazy. And that we're going to talk about that. Birdie, I'm really, really interested in hearing your perspective because you were kind of in this world a little bit. So you might have, some firsthand knowledge that we're, speculating, air quotes, about.
Hear me?
Oh, you're frozen.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go.
Hey, now we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wasn't a part of any like dark, smoky velvet rooms or anything like strange goings on.
Jonah is.
But all I wanted to say is like, Jonah, you could take that little micro experience you had and think about the fact that it was just like an experience that was like, you were like, it was like surreal, right? And you were sort of like,
this is weird,
kind of weird. So just take that times 1,000,000, but of the very most, like DQ was saying, the top elite, all you have to do is look at these meetings and the things they talk about at in Davos. I don't know if I'm saying that city right.
Yeah.
And think about what, like, yes, it's kind of, they have it on tape and they record, some of the pieces of the meetings. But imagine what happens when they're broken off into smaller groups and they're not recording, and the conversations that they have, and just like take your tiny experience and then like multiply that by massive amounts.
It's possible. I guess like I at least think what's hard for me is like I don't like believing things unless I know things. And it's kind of hard to ever know if like there's truly a conspiracy or it's just a bunch of weird white guys who are having sex with whores away from their wives. Like I don't know is the issue, right? I don't actually know what they do.
Could obviously that happens too. But
Yeah.
just because there's a seedy underbelly of that going on does then not eliminate the fact that there's masterminding going on in the intellectual rooms, right? Like if they can be that gnarly. I mean, you guys, I had a show. This is a whole other life that I'm exposing myself. I had as I sang, I had a show on a cruise ship in Australia. I sang 3 nights a week. I was, on the other side of the world. It was an amazing experience, but I had to, because my contract was for 10 months. I was on this ship, and it was a small cruise ship, so like 500 passengers, which is not large. I had to stay on board 1 week. It was like 10 days for a gay cruise where there were 1000%. I had sat at tables with men who were having conversations about the fact that they had told their wives that they were on a business trip and they were there on this cruise. So that's just like and I'm just saying this because it's like, I was like baffled. Like I was like, wow, that happens? Like that actually happens? So that was as shocking to me as a 22-year-old as that experience was to you, however old you were. So do you think that it's probable or even pretty possible that when you get just a peek behind the curtain, and we're just two regular people, right? Not special people, and you get a peek behind the curtain, don't you think it's probable or very possible that if you were to go like elevate to the top most wealthy, powerful people in the world, that there's major deals happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is crazy shit going on for sure. Like, I mean, the whole thing with kids, Epstein's Island, all of that stuff, I believe in all of that. I don't think he killed himself, right? Like, I believe in all of that. I believe that there's some really perverted stuff that happens. I don't know what it is about power that makes people want to do like the most screwed up shit ever.
Right.
For me, I don't want to say that's X is happening X is happening unless I know X is happening. So it depends on the evidence that's there for each different claim.
That means that throughout life, that would require you to experience absolutely everything without using deductive.
I'm not saying personal experience. So for me, for instance, like the what was the example I literally just used? Like Epstein, like literally his wife went to jail over this, or his significant other, right? Like there are records of like what was happening on the islands that was revealed. People don't know about it, but like there is literally court documents. That's really convincing to me, right?
Here's the thing, Jonah. Here's what you're not factoring, bro. And I'm going to jump in because you make a good point. Here's the issue. They were there for 20 years. And for 20 years, it was conjecture and conspiracy.
Exactly.
It's not until 20 years later, the documentation makes people like yourself who want proof now believe something, that people were being tortured and molested and human trafficked for 20 years. There was proof. but you didn't validate it in proof until it went through channels that made you.
Okay. Well, first off, I'm like 29, dude. Like, chill. Like, not me specifically. I'm just trying to live. Like, I didn't see anything, but like, I understand. I'm not. Here's what I'm saying. I'm agnostic to a lot of conspiracy theories. I'm not an atheist. Certain ones I 100 like that are conspiracy theories I 100% believe, and then certain ones I'm like that seems like I need to like I hate because the issue is how do we differentiate what's BS and what's actually real in
You
the
want my
end,
answer
right?
to that? Personal
Sure.
responsibility. My answer to that is personal responsibility. What do I mean? I mean that it is irresponsible, in my opinion, just Daniel's personal opinion. It's irresponsible to take something that you see in a TikTok or online or in an article and say, that's true, they're raping elephants, right? That's
Right.
irresponsible. I think it's equally irresponsible to dismiss it until it's so overwhelmingly blatant that you can't deny it anymore. That's no different than you working in an environment where you know people are being sexually harassed or mistreated, and because you weren't in the room when it happened and forced to take responsibility, you were standing on the other side, you heard everything, you probably knew, but you turned a blind eye to it because it wasn't convenient or because you weren't forced to take accountability. I think that when it comes to stuff like this, and I use Epstein Island as a great example, here's the question that we have. Harvey Weinstein, Epstein, P. Diddy, for decades, there was evidence, and I'm air quoting evidence for the sake of this conversation, that there was shady stuff happening. Bro, I could send you countless videos of hip hop artists that were coming up in the game that said, I turned down my contract. Why? Because they wanted me to go into a back room and do some stuff that I was not okay with. Why? Because they wanted me to prick my finger and sign something in blood saying I'm selling my soul to the devil. I'm not okay with that. Why is it that every single solitary major artist for the last 20 years that's A-list has a song about selling their soul to the devil? Is that just some random coincidence, Jonah? But what do you call that? Is that coincidence or is that evidence? For the last 20 years, that was just conspiracy theory when we talked about Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. And what used to be conspiracy is now being called evidence. What changed? It became overwhelming and you couldn't deny it anymore. The evidence didn't change. How people were forced to look at it. So when you ask the question, what do we do? I think that's why it's personal responsibility. Maybe I stopped being so quick to turn a blind eye to something that's not being so obvious in my face that I think a little bit harder before I throw it out. That's my opinion.
Well, I think with the onset, I just wanted to jump in here and I'll take myself off the thing. But I think with the onset of this, really obviously with the social media 24/7, coverage, anything that we do is seen, right, and recorded, and there's a possibility of evidence at every corner, right, and in any way there's evidence of anything. And so if you think about the fact that it's just harder to hide things now. So look at, like, I always think about this. When I was growing up, and I didn't know, JFK, like I was itty bitty. I don't even, whatever. But I remember, like, people would say, like, oh, he was assassinated, whatever. And then it was just like in the last recent, how many years, you guys, that there have been like books written and movies made now about his assassination, right? But like way back in the day, people just accepted this story. And it wasn't until just recently that there's been enough evidence that's come out that has said otherwise, like that story was just the things that we were spoon fed. So it's like sometimes it does take a really long time. And I think, again, with the onset of social media coverage and everybody recording everything with their phones at all times and like secretly recording people under the table while they're having a conversation, like it's just harder to hide the evidence. So I feel like there's a lot more out there now that, yes, you see the TikTok and you see the this, and there's lots of people who just read the first line of they read the headline and then the first sentence and then they just buy it, right? They don't go deeper. They don't listen to two sides of the story and try to use common sense and evidence to figure out what the truth could be. But I do think that this idea of like the elites and these, like, I always just look at WEF and I just think that's where all the conversations happen. They're having, yes, they have a meeting and they talk about the bullet points at the meeting, and then they go into other areas or they have dinner and they're like conjuring up these like little schemes.
Yeah. I guess here's my thing, right? At least my opinion on it, right? I agree with you, Quijano, that it could be possible, but that didn't really answer my question of how do we know which is possible, which is definitely true, and which is absolutely a lie, right? That's what I'm concerned about with conspiracies a lot of the times. So that's why I stay agnostic most of the times on different conspiracies. While others, I'm like I just know that's not one, right? I mean, this is one, like there are conspiracies out there that start taking like a anti-Semitic undertone or like a racist undertone. And I'm like, okay, are we really actually questioning things, or are we just being anti-Semitic or racist, right? Like I've heard this one before, right? So the issue for me, I would say, is like, yes, I think the Bohemian Grove is weird, first off, from my own personal experience, right? Can I say they're sacrificing goats to an owl god? No. Can I say it's really weird that a bunch of old white people want to be together and there's probably some shady stuff happening? Yeah. I just don't know what shady stuff is. And I feel like TikTok and other people for clicks and views will just say some of the wildest shit. And I have no idea if that's true. And it sounds crazy. And I'm like, you people have like no evidence. I don't believe you have evidence specifically for this claim. And that's usually my issue, right? What you guys have said about like the elites ruling the world, wanting more power, I totally buy that. There's like, right? It just depends on what it is, I guess, is really what it means to me. And like something being possible is so different than it actually happening, right? So
I have a question for you. I have a question, Jonah, because this is something I feel like is really at the base of it. How important is it to actually know for certain the answer when the discussion is happening? Isn't it more important to just investigate and find out, and like instead of like having to be certain when you lay your head down at night that you know whether or not that is true or that is false, like with certainty, black and white? Is it really necessary to know everything?
Such a great question.
Or is it just good to say, I'm not certain, so I'm going to keep looking for the answer if it's important to you? Because a lot
I'm okay with I'm not certain, I'm looking for the answer. Quijano does not say I'm not certain. Like you do say I'm not certain about things and I'm looking for the answer. And sometimes, Quijano, it feels like you just are like, no, this is happening, right? Depends on the different issues. Sometimes you are very much, I'll give you credit, like a lot of times you are just saying like, I'm questioning this, right? And sometimes there's just certain ones where I'm like, that's just so unlikely. Like when we were in the WhatsApp, like I don't think you don't mind me bringing up the Joe Biden WhatsApp chat, right? I know we didn't say we were talking about it. I just, but like you were sending me stuff. It's like, is Joe Biden like Joe Biden? What if it's just a mask? And I'm like, bro, for that one, like it's just like that is just so out there to be able to hide that one, you know, is just like crazy to me. There's like ones where it's like, dude, that would be so unbelievable. It would blow my mind. And then there are ones that wouldn't blow my mind. It wouldn't blow my mind that they're sacrificing to like an owl god, or like making you right, or like saying I've sold my soul to the devil, right? Because there's like an obvious like, I want power over you so that I can control you there, right? I don't really know why the hell it's just like, and that makes more sense to me than like we literally are going to replace Joe Biden with a robot or like someone else.
First of all, I never said robot, but okay. So I love this conversation. I love that Birdie asked that question. That was a fantastic question because I think that's really the crux of it. I mean, the premise of the way you phrased your question is whether or not it makes sense to you. I'm assuming you agree, Jonah, that it doesn't need to make sense to you or me or any of us for it to exist, right? We agree with that. That idea. Okay. So that being said, that the idea that it has to fit in our paradigm in order for it to happen isn't a prerequisite. Like it could be completely outlandish to us and still exist because our perspective isn't the end all be all of what is, right? That's just the way it is. If you go to the Amazon and you find a tribe of people who haven't been exposed to modern technology and you hand them an iPhone, it is going to be completely foreign and irrelevant. And they're going to say exactly what you just said about these foreign concepts. What's the point of this? I don't need this. This doesn't make any sense to me. Look at how I'm living my life, and none of this is real. Yet for us, it's an essential part of day-to-day life. In the same fashion, there are people and groups of people that exist on this planet that live in a world where there are elements of reality that are completely foreign to us, that for them are foregone conclusions because they have been conclusions and part of their plan again, for generations. Our ignorance to the existence of these things doesn't make them implausible. And so we have to understand that if we're going to be coming from a fair premise, that premise has to include the fact that our opinion is irrelevant. At least it can be. But I think that's what goes back to Birdie's point, which I think is really the foundational starting point of this, which is, do I have to understand it for it to be real? And I think the answer is no. I'm going to ask you a question. Jonah, do you know for a fact that you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur?
I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty confident because I have evidence because I've been successful at different things. But when starting out, no, you have to have faith.
Gotcha. So because there was evidence that's third party that somebody else may have succeeded at something, even though you have zero firsthand experience with it, you were comfortable pursuing an entire lifestyle change to pursue something you had absolutely no firsthand evidence of being true.
But I know that tons of other people are successful at entrepreneurship. So why the fuck can't I be successful? That's a little different.
Fair. It is a little bit different. Correct. But I'm also not asking you to make an entire life change based on this information. The simple thing that I'm presenting is the same question that Birdie asked in a different way, which is, do you really need to know it all in order to trust that it's possible? Or is the effort of continuing to ask the question enough? And I think that's really what it comes down to, is when you ask the question, well, what's my proof? I don't know that proof is the right end goal. I think the right end goal is the pursuit of that information, the continuing to ask the questions. I appreciate you giving me credit in my willingness to say I don't know everything. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know everything. I could find out tomorrow that I'm a complete idiot and that this world does operate exactly like they tell us on MSNBC. And, you know, Joe Biden was completely healthy and Kamala Harris is completely capable and Donald Trump is completely horrible. And all of these things are true. And the interest rates and the inflation don't really bother me that much. It's normal for me to spend $400 a week on groceries. I could wake up tomorrow and find out that all of that stuff is real. However, I started on this 20 years ago, bro. And I started researching this stuff a long time ago, and it had nothing to do with conspiracies. I was actually pretty anti-conspiracy theorist. My dad was a conspiracy theorist, and I used to make fun of him because I thought it was silly. But me researching other things led me to the existence of a world behind the world that's presented to us, the Bohemian Grove of life, meaning that there is the powerful presentation that is shown to us about our senators and our world leaders and our celebrities. But those same people go and get naked in front of a burning owl on the weekends. What's going on in the background that leads them to do that? I don't need to know exactly why to know that there's something weird behind that. And what I'll tell you is this: the more you look into that, even if you don't find clear answers, what you do find is enough information to make you say, all right, even if I don't know everything, there's enough information to tell me that what I am being told isn't true. So at least the question of everything is still viable.
What if both are true? Like, I feel like sometimes the official answer is true, and
like,
there's weird
stuff. Give me an example. What? Give me an official answer that you think is true. Like, give me an example of this.
Let me think of an example. Like,
I have an example.
I love it.
Okay, this is like super philosophical, whatever. This is very broad.
Okay.
But it is an example. So the saying, the idea that ignorance is bliss. Okay. Simultaneously, knowledge is power. That's crazy to me because I don't like to be stupid about things. But I also know that the more I know, the more restless I am. And also the more capable I feel. So it's almost like I think back to times when my kids were really little and it seemed hard, but I look back now and go, oh, that was glorious. Like things are harder now. So I think that things can like that. It's like ignorance.
It's duality.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think ignorance is bliss because with knowledge comes responsibility. And I think a lot of the reason that people ignore.
Also, the more you know, the more your heart gets troubled a little bit.
Yep.
Right?
I agree. Because here's the thing. I think that it's easier for certain people, for most people, to just be like, I don't want to even believe that that's true. Because if it is, what does that mean? It's easier to believe that like I can trust my doctor and they're going to give me the best advice that's possible for my health. That's easy. That's a reassuring idea. It really is. Until it's not.
It's like, I just want to believe that everyone knows that if I get this vaccine, I'm going to be okay. It's just easier to do the thing than it is to question it and dig a little deeper and go, wait a second, what happens if I don't do it? And tell me again, give me some more evidence as to why I should do it. So it's that tricky thing in life. It's like, I always think back to World War. Like, think about all of the Jews that fled when Hitler was coming in. There were so many people that saw the writing on the wall that fled and were able to get out. And then you have to wonder, like, some people were probably like, we're going to be fine. It's fine. We're going to be fine. We're just going to put this patch on our arm and it's going to be fine. Isn't it weird, you guys? There's just this like line. There's just this like very thin line.
Yep. And this is where you're making fantastic points, Bertie, because this for me is exactly what I mean when I say at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. The Second Amendment is a great example. Why do we need guns? Why do you need guns? Jonah, just out of curiosity, do you know what the purpose of the Second Amendment is?
It's so that like a tyrannical government doesn't form, or like the citizens can protect themselves against.
There we go. Why do you need AR-15s? Because the military has assault weapons. And the purpose of the Second Amendment is to protect yourself if your government becomes tyrannical, which means our founding fathers who didn't live in the world where my cold Starbucks is my worst problem, who lived in a world where uprisings against governments were a thing that needed to be factored, they understood that there is an existence where a tyrannical government can change everything. And they wanted to put their citizens in a position to be able to defend themselves against that. But we don't want to act like that's a reality. We don't want to act like that's a possibility. Is it because maybe we're a little bit naive to the comfort that we've been born into in our society? And I think we don't talk about this enough. And I think we all want to live in a world where we hope the government has our best interest at heart. But our founding fathers knew that there was a possibility they wouldn't. And I think that the rest of the world is full of people who live in a reality that doesn't reflect that. Is it responsible or irresponsible for us to not plan for that eventuality? Jonah, in your opinion?
Depends what you mean by plan for it. Like, in what way? having a gun, I think most people don't have guns for that reason. I think that's why the founding fathers put it in there. I think most people have guns because it's fun. I'm gonna throw it out there.
Well, I would say
self-
most of the Second Amendment enthusiasts do have it for that reason. The people that are
it's fun to shoot guns. I love shooting guns. It's a good time. Should we plan for that reality? Yeah, it is probably a good idea to plan for that possibility. The question is how likely is it, and how unlikely it is, and what are the reasons for what it would be and why it would be? There's things that I agree with you guys with, and things that I don't agree with you guys with. That's the thing. It just depends. Each one I'm going to be different on, right? So it would just depend on the one.
Just to be clear, the idea of you being open-minded to this, by definition, makes you a conspiracy theorist. Your willingness to ask these questions and think through it
is
that
going makes to label you a conspiracy theorist. Then okay, I wouldn't consider that a conspiracy theorist. I consider a conspiracy theorist someone who's like, no, 100% there's inflation because global elites want it where it's your $400 or it's $400 groceries. When there's obviously a pretty good official reason. We were dealing with a recession. And that was really... Sorry. Oh, it's okay. Well, at least the official reason is, and I agree with this is economics, is you have to, when you're in a recession, in order to combat it, one thing you do is print money. And that helps with recessions, right? It can cause inflation, and we probably had too much of it. But is that literally the entire plan, right? There's also a certain point. There's also a certain point where like conspiracies go so far where it's like, dude, for that to be kept a secret, and then B, for all those parts to fit is so hard. It's not hard to believe like there was sexual impropriety in Hollywood, and that like they might be, and even like with kids, right? That's like possible to be kept a secret, and it seems more possible than me than global elites purposefully caused inflation in order to fuck the middle class, right? I don't know. I like whatever the conspiracy theories is. To me, I'm just going to say like there are levels to it, I guess. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
What were you going to say, Birdie?
Oh, I was just going back to the beginning when he said his kind of example of what he thought a conspiracy theorist is, because for me, I just think a conspiracy theorist, which I would fall into this category, is someone who has stopped believing what the mainstream media says. Usually I say, okay, I hear the words, I'm going to slice off about 75% of it and call it BS. And there's about 25% of probably facts in there. And then I want to go, and then I hear them all saying the exact same thing, like they have a script. And then you read it, all use the same, everyone uses the same words, the same verbiage, whatever. And then I go, okay, I'm going to wait till the dust settles. I'm going to dig a little deeper. And I'm going to, it's probably almost, it's like 25% the truth, and the rest is just like for ratings. And for like a movement of that sort of talking point. Let's like push the talking point. Let's push the talking point. And that's where I fall. A perfect example is the whole COVID vaccine, like the COVID thing and the COVID vaccine and all the people that like, I cannot believe I sit here and cannot.
Like that one for me, like I totally like. Anyway, sorry, but like that one, I'm totally against you guys on. Like,
I can't believe people lost their freaking jobs, their livelihoods.
Like that's sad. I agree.
Over that. That is mind blowing to me. And at the time, I thought it was mind blowing. But I was a conspiracy theorist, right? I was just like, there's no freaking way. There's no way this can possibly be happening. Like, anyway. That's kind
I guess I just said the ratios are just different for me. Like I would probably say 75% is true and 25% is BS and like hyped up stuff. I guess that's all. That's the only difference. right? I know I've been like recently very pro the, you know, like establishment. That's what it's looked like on this podcast. But Quijano, I mean, like the research I did on Trump, for instance, none of that is in, like, it is in the mainstream media, but it was incredibly hard to find. You mentioned that at the beginning of how hard it is to find that information, right? So I don't know. I guess it just depends on what it is. Like, for instance, for me, like COVID vaccines, like I think it sounds like you guys believe that they're absolute bullshit. They don't give you any resistance whatsoever, right?
No, I don't.
I don't
No,
know.
I think that they probably give you a little bit, but I think that to say this is the answer for the world, everyone must do it. And if you don't do it, you're literally an evil person who wants to kill my grandma. That was
Yep.
like that was the talking point. It was like people were out just saying vile things about people who were choosing not to get the vaccine, like so hateful that I was like, "Oh my god, these people are like blaming death and despair on people who aren't getting vaccinated."
And 3 years later, they're finding
And
out how overwhelmingly dangerous it was.
so dangerous. Like my lovely friend's mom died in her sleep and was fine, was healthy, was a freaking died in her sleep of a blood clot. Now, could that have come from something else? Sure. But you hear so many of those stories and young people getting sick, like randomly, heart.
Oh, we lost Brady.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, I just don't. I believe that I don't even know where I was going with that, but I just believe that it was like 75. I just think that there was probably some benefit, but I think that there was probably an equal or maybe slightly more harm done than benefit, because how many people got vaccinated who then still got sick?
Most
Maybe
of
it
them.
was
A lot of them.
less. Maybe it was
I
less.
was
I
one.
never got vaccinated, and when I got COVID, it was like nothing. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah,
nothing. I was sick for 5 days, and then I got it again, and I got sick. But my husband got really sick. He was sick for 14 days, and then took ivermectin and got better in 3 days. Ivermectin,
The horse drug.
the horse drug that is so hilarious that
we can get into
that was
COVID.
that. By the way, Jonah, that's a perfect example too. The mainstream media got on board with this talking point of like it's an animal drug, it's an animal medication, it's livestock medication, people should not be taking it, it's very dangerous, and literally it's existed. What the guy who
It was
created
Nobel.
it
It was a
was
Nobel
a
Award.
Nobel Peace
Yep.
Prize winner for creating the safest, most lowest side effect drug for mankind. It's prescribed for scabies, it's prescribed for other things since the 1950s. But the mainstream media were pushing this narrative of it's an livestock medication. Don't do it. You're going to hurt yourself and kill yourself. And it's like, no, it was $4, and my husband got better in 3 days, like that. 100 was like really sick, lost 14 pounds, was really sick, not get better, lost 14 pounds, started taking ivermectin. It was $4. The next time we got sick, we tried to get ivermectin. It was $325. You don't tell me that's a effing bullshit. That's a control power thing. That's a big pharma control power thing.
Yep.
COVID was such a weird event. Here's what I would say about COVID. And like I could fight on every single individual point. Specifically, I agree it was BS what they did with ivermectin. I think some of the things they did with COVID was really good. The vaccine works. It doesn't fully cure you, but my mom, who got like every single fucking booster, she didn't get COVID until this year, I think, or something like that, right? She was pretty well protected, and she'd been around me for COVID. So it depends on how far you go, right? The people
But
and the hard thing with COVID.
She didn't get it because she got the vaccine, right?
Yeah, but you can't assume, but you also can't assume that like all the people who
Bro, high school
That
kids,
did save lives.
hundreds of high school kids dying from heart attacks because of blood clots.
But how many people
All of
were
the-
saved from the vaccine?
They don't have numbers for that, right? Because
Well,
you
that's
can't
an impossible number
really
to
get
tell.
out of that.
Well,
But they
no, but
do
you
have-
can, you can tell by the death rates of how they went down once the vaccine came out. Like, death rates did go down. You can argue that it was also partially we're getting group immunity, so these things were naturally going to go down, right? Like,
Was
death
that
rates right
like
now
the
for COVID
polio
are like,
vaccine? They say the polio vaccine.
I'm not like, it's
Right.
not the polio vaccine, right? Like, it's not equivalent. I agree. It's not nearly as good of a polio vaccine, right?
No, I'm saying because when the polio vaccine came out, the polio occurrences had already started dropping significantly, but they tried to say that it was because of the vaccine. And now history has shown they go back now. And of course now, even though it's another like JFK thing, it's like they spoon feed you the story. And then all decades and decades later, we can dig into the science and like realize that it was a forced vaccine when the occurrences were already diminishing. So then you can't actually say which is which. You know what I mean?
The fact that they were offering people free weed to get that thing should have been the first sign that there's something going on here, right? Like, you're trying to.
What the hell? They were offering free weed for the
Yes.
vaccine? I
Dude,
never got it.
you saw a video of was it a governor or a
I
senator?
wanted my free weed. What the
Yeah,
hell?
were you in
I didn't get my free weed.
Colorado,
That's
though?
bullshit.
You got.
I was in California when that was happening. But here's the thing too, right? Like, COVID's such a hard one because that was such a. If I was a government, like, let's just take this for example. What do you do as a government when a pandemic hits? Like, certain things they shouldn't have done. They shouldn't have lied about masks at the beginning, right? But like social distancing will prevent a pandemic. It will, or not prevent, but it will slow down a pandemic, right? It wasn't a lie that hospitals were getting filled up with COVID patients and like people were freaking out about that, right? So the question is like, what do you do as a government? And there was some BS where it's like, where people would say, like, I totally disagree when like Fauci's saying trust the science. It's like, that's not how science works. For science to work, you need years to actually come to a truth, right? We're just trying, but like, also, what do you do with like what you got in the moment? But if the government didn't lie about the masks, let's say that they like, because they initially said they don't help at all, and then they're like, actually, they do help a lot. What they were worried about was that the masks would be stockpiled by insane conspiracy theorists, and then more people would die. So it's a hard catch-22.
Here's my question for you, right? And I think this I'm gonna share a video that we had talked about for this, and I think this leads into the conversation because we talked about the media, and oddly, all of this stuff does go back to the media. Whether
we
or
have
not
to get to the media eventually.
So here's the question that I have, and do you think that COVID was just some random thing that happened to be an illness that came to our country, or are you aware of the fact that this was
The
born?
lab virus?
Yeah, and the person who was overseeing.
I think it's much more likely that it came from a lab. Did China purposely?
A lab that was funded by and overseen by the same dude who was telling us how to protect ourselves. You realize that, right? Fauci, the guy that we were supposed to be trusting for all of his knowledge, who told us he knew nothing about gain-of-function research, was the same guy who was overseeing the creation of the virus.
Okay, prove that. Prove that he was overseeing the creation of the virus.
Oh, Jonah, that is all over. You can dig.
Okay, I'll
dig
look it
into
up.
That. You got to read up on that.
Wait, hold on.
That
Wait,
is-
what are we saying? Are we saying that Fauci created the virus, or are you saying that he was overseeing a ton of different labs and one of them happened to be the lab in Wuhan? Are you like? I want to know if you think he specifically had knowledge.
Here's my point, right?
Or that it was being created.
This
Like
is
what?
my point.
Like be specific.
This is my point. You do not hold your ability to trust the narrative to the same scrutiny that you have that you hold trusting other information. You're telling us to prove that he oversaw it, but you're not requiring yourself to prove that he didn't. You're blindly
The burden
trusting.
of proof is on if you make a claim, the burden of proof is on the person who makes the claim, not the person who's saying, I don't, like, you have to prove that to me.
And
Right? Just
Fauci
in the
made the
same way
claim
when I
that
say-
he had nothing to do with the creation. You're just trusting that. Why aren't you holding him to the same standard of saying, all right, bro, prove it. Prove to me you had nothing to do with this. There's millions of people who are saying you built this stuff in a lab. Prove that it's wrong. Prove that you didn't. Notice it's all I'm saying, bro. And you don't even have to answer this right now. Think about the point. There were millions of people, and since 2020, there have been countless arguments stating, including the president himself, who you don't trust, have said this was created in a lab in China and weaponized and released in our country. Our sitting president said this. Multiple ads, multiple links, multiple resources, multiple. Hold on.
I didn't hear that it was purposeful from our sitting president.
Why do you think he kept? Okay, here's what I'm gonna say. There was a lot of information.
Like, show that it was purposeful.
Here's all I'm gonna say. There was a lot of people out there who said it was purposeful. That information was everywhere in 2020. There was as much information saying it was purposeful. Hold on. There was because that's not the question I'm asking you. I'm asking you a different question. Hold on. Stop Googling, Jonah. Hear my question, bro.
Google that. Like, I want to know if I'm right or a complete idiot.
Hear my question, bro. Jonah, here's my question. There were countless people in 2020 saying this was weaponized and manufactured, overseen by Fauci. There were also news reports saying that it wasn't. Here's my question to you. Are you ready for my question, Jonah? Because I can tell you're reading right now.
Okay.
You ready for my question?
Yeah.
How come you're requiring people to prove that it was grown in a lab overseen by Fauci, but you're not requiring Fauci to prove that it wasn't? Why are you defaulting your trust towards...
Wait, hold on. How claims work is... Wait. If you claim something is true, the burden of proof is on the person to prove the thing is true. It's not on the burden of me to prove the thing is false. Just like when I said Trump is a dictator, I have to prove to you that that's true. You don't have to prove to me that that's false, because then you're false, because you can't falsify.
But
to prove a negative is almost impossible. To prove a positive is possible.
But that's a silly way to believe information by saying, well, whoever said it first must have been telling the truth, and whoever said it second now has to prove it. That's silly.
No, it's not about first or second. No, it's about okay. Like, how am I going to explain this? So, like,
I get what you're saying. It's like, prove that Brett Kavanaugh. You have to prove that Brett Kavanaugh was guilty.
Raped that girl 30 years ago or whatever.
Right.
How could
I get what you're saying, and I want to offer a middle ground here, because I think Fauci, I know for a fact he was in charge of funding to research SARS coronavirus, and the bat population. His organization was in charge of researching that particular viral strain or whatever. I think it's possible that something accidentally went wrong, but here's what I do know happened. They tried to cover it up. And they were
that I believe is like that's possible. Like, I think I vaguely remember seeing something where there was something
I'm not saying that's true, though. I'm not saying that's true, but that's where my head goes, is like, because I can't believe that people would be so maniacal and evil, but then we have had Hitler. Like, so and like Stalin and all of these people that do, and Epstein and things like that. But so my brain goes to that point, like giving every bit of grace that could happen. But then when you are you're so selfish and you're so evil that you would lie and try to cover it up, and the people who were the lab people like disappeared. They disappeared, and the one woman actually somehow got out with her family and landed in San Francisco, and she was like hiding and silenced because she was fearing for her life from this lab. That she had this information. So like, that's where I'm like, I don't know that it wasn't on purpose, but in my brain, I would like to believe that it was accidental. But then they immediately moved into let's lie about it and blame it on the wet markets. Give me a freaking break. They ran with that storyline for what, a month, 2 months?
I think what it was is I'm pretty sure the lab animals they tested the virus on were bats. So I think actually both stories were true, that it was a mix of they were testing the virus on bats and then it got into the wet markets. That's what I believe. I think what I read was happening, but I might be wrong about that. It's hard for me to remember. I haven't thought about COVID in a while.
For me, this isn't a COVID question, though, Jonah. All I'm saying is this. This is my simple point, and Bertie makes a fair point. My question is, I think there's ways that you view the world. You say the burden of proof is on the questioner, and my question is why? Why does Fauci
the burden of proof is on the person? This is a logic thing. So, like, I'm going to try to give a really simple example. Like, for instance, also Gianmarco agrees with me. Just FYI, going to throw it out there. So that means I'm right. But anyways, so like, okay. The earth is round, right? The person who says that the earth is round has to be the one to prove that it's round, because otherwise, me as the person in the negative, like, how do I describe this? This is like a logic thing. And this is not what I prepared to talk about at all.
You're not prepared to use logic?
No, to talk about logic, like the rules of logic. It's because if I say that the world is round and I'm not the one who is proving it, and I'm like, no, you have to prove to me that it's not. Well, the issue is like, wait, what the heck? We could do that with anything. How do I prove that? Like, it's like you say, okay, there's a spaghetti monster above us. And then you're like, I'm like, okay, prove that. And then you're like, no, prove that it's not. It's like, bro, I can't prove that it's not.
No,
but like, anything could be true. That means literally everything could be true.
No, first of all, anything can be true, but this isn't logic. I'm going to give you another equivalent, which is more applicable to this particular circumstance, because you're using outlandish examples. Jonah, if you move to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you try to move to the hood, and you find a place that you say is nice because the real estate agent tells you that it's nice. And I tell you, Jonah, that's the hood. They're going to rob you. You're telling me that logic states you believe the real estate agent because she told you first. So the burden of proof is now on me.
It's not the first person. Okay. It's not about who tells you first. That's not what I'm saying. It has to do with like a positive versus negative claim.
Okay,
right?
So you're saying no. Okay, so forget the word first.
Just use two positive claims. Do you want me to? What I mean by positive is
I didn't use a positive claim. I used a negative claim. The real estate agent says this is a safe, trustworthy neighborhood. I am bringing the negative claim. No, it's not. According to your air quotes logic, burden of proof is on me to prove that it's not a safe neighborhood. And I'm telling you, that's not logic.
No, it's on the burden. No, it's on the burden of proof of the positive. So it would be on the burden of proof of the real estate agent to prove that it's a good neighborhood in that scenario. Okay, this is something I have to prepare for. For like this is a rules of logic thing that I am like. This is like going way back to like a philosophy class that I took 8 years ago in college, and I'm like trying to remember exactly what it is and the reasons behind it. This would be like a whole nother conversation. It has to do with the if you're making a positive claim versus a negative claim, right?
Fantastic.
So then I don't know how to explain it other than the spaghetti monster. Like that was the best example because it's just very easy because we know the spaghetti monster is not real. I say there's a spaghetti monster above your head, Keanu. And then your response to me is
look.
No, there isn't. Like, prove it. And then my response is no, prove that there isn't. Then it's like, wait, what? Like, no. Nobody knows anything.
Jonah, what you're saying, but this is the burden of proof thing. That what you're saying, what it is the given accepted state of existence of what, like the given accepted understanding of a situation if someone were to come along and challenge it, the burden of proof is on them. So there are givens in a current scenario, like
Sort of, I think. I
So
think
here's
that's
my,
kind
hold on,
of
guys. Here's my response. Here's my response to all of that, because I hear what both of you are saying. I understand the logic behind what both of you were saying. I just think that those are not logical premises. I think those are naive premises, because if we use Birdie's example, that says that because it's popular or widely accepted, it's trustworthy. And that's naive. That is the definition of how to manipulate and control a population. Period.
No, but like I don't fully agree with Birdie's way of saying that. It doesn't have to do with
now. Let me address yours now, Jonah. In either example that you give me, Jonah, you're still proving my point. Because if we use the previous example that you gave, in that the person who is espousing the positive, the burden of proof is on them to do as much, then you're proving my point that Fauci claiming that everything is safe and that he did not wrongfully release this to the public, according to that logic, the burden of proof was on him. Yet you didn't require him to prove that, to trust him. You placed the burden of proof on the people espousing the negative.
Hold on. I was questioning the fact that Fauci knew and was like, it sounded like what you guys were saying was he managed the lab and then weaponized the virus specifically to be released, right? That's what it sounded like it was saying, right? That's a strong claim, right? I would believe that he was in charge of like a network of research labs, and he might have even known that they were working on the coronavirus. I don't believe he purposefully leaked it. I don't remember ever seeing anything on that, right? So, and I do believe he probably lied during COVID that he did that. Like, I bet that's believable. He lied before, right?
He 100% lied. He 100% lied, because the minute it got out, he moved into talking point control. He lost, this like trauma mitigation, like from.
Here's what I think. Here's what I think is the funniest part about all of this, and the reason why I'm pushing back so hard to you, Jonah, on this isn't because I disagree with you asking questions. It's that I wonder why you trust the establishment by default and make people questioning the establishment prove themselves. That's my only point. The simple takeaway here is that you default trust the establishment, and then when we questioned the establishment, which in this example would be Fauci, you said prove it. And my question to you is, did you want Fauci to prove it before you trusted him? Because you're giving you're defaulting your trust to him.
So first off, I didn't just like blindly trust Fauci. I agree with you that it was probably a lab, but I agree that it was a lab leak. That the evidence for that seems overwhelming and crazy, right? So it's not like I agree. Like I didn't take. Once I learned that, I didn't like completely believe the wetback story fully, right?
The what story?
First off, that it was just like in a market or some shit or whatever. The official story, right? So it's not like I'm not like questioning these things. Do you know what Occam's razor is? Keanu, have you ever heard of that before?
Occam's razor, yes.
Occam's razor. My issue is that conspiracy, like things like this, it's like, okay, we know this X, Y, and Z. We know that, all right, Fauci oversaw labs. Did he only oversee this Wuhan lab, or did he oversee a bunch of labs? I'm pretty sure it's a fuck ton of labs, a network of labs, right? Okay. Did he know they were working on the coronavirus? Probably. Did he know that did he purposely release the virus in order to weaponize it against the United States? That the thing is that starts going into like, okay, we learned a couple things that are true, but why are we going so far with that?
And
like,
that's a fantastic question. Here's my question. This is where I think, and the only reason I'm jumping in right here is because I think where you just made the left is where I make a different turn. And I'm not saying either one of us are right or wrong. I'm simply challenging you to answer why you make the turn that you make. Here's the turn I make, right? Well, let me say it this way. The way you just described the term that you made was, why would we assume that when Occam's razor tells us this is the most simple, so we should just trust that? And my response is, why the hell would we just assume that everything is that simple? The world is usually not that simple. And unfortunately, people in a position of power usually are not benevolent. So as a result, I'm not assuming the worst or the best. I am assuming neither and leaving everything on the table with the responsibility of me doing my homework to find out which is which. So you get to that fork in the road and you say, yeah, that seems like a stretch. Let me just really believe what's most plausible. Well, then you got to be able to define what you determine plausible, which goes back to our previous perspective. We lost Birdie, which goes back to our previous perspective of we assume that our paradigm is the end all be all of existence. It's the people in the Amazon handing them an iPhone. Our paradigm of what's important and their paradigm in what's important are drastically different. So the only way your assumption of, well, whatever's reasonable to me is probably the most likely answer assumes that everybody has the same degree of what's reasonable.
Well, that's not Occam's razor. It's not what's reasonable to me. It's what's most things are simple in the world. Like there are complicated things, but most things are simple.
And I think
that's
the burden exactly.
That's not
but you're trusting it. And so my simple question is, or that's not the right. My simple perspective is the argument that I'm presenting is this. I hear you. I see where you're coming from. But that still requires a little bit of naive trust to assume that it's probably just the most simple answer. My question isn't, yeah, I'm believing the most complicated answer, so obviously I'm right. That's just as naive. I think that the fair answer, in my opinion, is when it comes to this is interesting, I think the responsible thing to do is say, it seems pretty lofty that they would have planned that, but it's not impossible. So before I assume that they didn't, because it seems like the simplest answer, why don't I just research all eventualities and see which one presents the most compelling information?
Okay, but Quijano, have you researched that he weaponized COVID?
Just to be clear, my default in life is to question everything. I don't look at anything on face value.
But like, I'm asking you, did you do that research? I haven't done the research, right? What I remember from the news reporting is that he did lie, that he oversaw, that he knew about the coronavirus, that they were working on the coronavirus. That's what I remember being reported, right? I'm pretty sure in the mainstream media. Like, I don't think that was like even a hidden secret. What I don't remember was that he purposefully released it to get power. I don't even know what would be the reason to purposefully.
No, I don't think Fauci I don't think that's the implication either, because that assumes Fauci has some sort of control over something, and he doesn't. I think he's just a little.
Well, he had control over the labs. That's what it sounded like. It's not like he might have managed them.
He was placed in control, dude. Like there is people above him. That guy's a pawn on the board, right? In my opinion. But I think this comes back to, let's go back to our original, where this whole foundation of this, because as much as we didn't talk about it at the beginning, I think we've been talking about the point of our message this entire time, which is what we believe. Let's go back to the media. Where is it founded on? Is it founded on independent thought and information that we researched on our own, of our own volition, to come to our own conclusions? Is it based on the worldview that was given to us by our parents and we just follow and do what they did because that's what they believed, so we feel right and comfortable with that? Or do we just believe what we're told? And then the question that I ask is it safe? And what's funny, Jonah, is you have mentioned as a support to your point of view on a lot of these topics, well, what I remember seeing, what I remember hearing on the news. And what that tells me is that you're using the news as your frame of reference. And the only way that that's a strong frame of reference is if that's trustworthy, which kind of brings us.
But like, I go back to this because I want to know, like, not to like, I'm not trying to like bust your balls here or anything, but like, you literally just said we have to be doing our own research. when you said you said that like, yeah, he weaponized it. He weaponized COVID. Did you do the research for that? Like, do you have that research?
So in 2020, yes. In the recent findings that have been released, no. So I have not corroborated what has been released recently with what I found back then. My understanding of what has been released recently is that it matches what I found back then. So
what you're accusing me of, you in the end are somewhat doing also, because in the end we don't have time to fully research everything, right?
To a degree, yeah. But here's the thing. My argument isn't that you need to believe my conclusion. My argument is, why do you place the burden of proof on everybody that challenges the establishment? And why aren't you giving the establishment the same burden of proof?
But I am. It's not like I take it. You're acting like I always take the official story at heart, right? I just don't go as far as you do, right? Where I would say, and I don't know, like, unless you do research on this shit, which very few people have the time to do that, right? Like, I don't know, like, to do research on literally everything, like to do every single research every single time for every single issue is A, it takes a lot of time, and B, there is a certain point, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, we know X, Y, and Z, but that doesn't mean that A is necessarily true, right? So, okay, we could investigate if A is true, but how would we even know if A is true, Fauci weaponizing COVID, without like a news source or like a reporter finding out that information? The issue is, Keanu, on this podcast, you said that like, he weaponized COVID, right? And so then it comes to the point of like, well, where did you get that info from? Probably a reporter, right? Or it was made up. I don't understand where we're getting anything from in the end. There are certain things that have to be done through reporters like that, right? Or there have to be memos, like found evidence, or like court testimony. This is why, like, we're getting into a lot of these conversations of, and I think our next one honestly should be, how do we know what is true? I think that you and I actually need to have that conversation eventually.
Great conversation.
Because I think you and I think our fundamental differences come from that. It's like, I feel like you have the propensity to believe things as true when there is some evidence supporting it, but not enough evidence supporting it. That's my feeling about it, right? I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong, right? That's how I feel about it. In terms of the official story, I don't always believe it full off, but unless someone can provide better evidence, then I'm gonna, like, you have to, I guess here's the thing, you have to provide, the official story always has evidence of some sort. Almost always. It's very rare that it doesn't have like any evidence, like it's just completely made up. You're like smiling, so I bet you might have an example of that. But usually it has some evidence. So if someone doesn't provide any countervailing evidence, then I'm going to go with the person who has any evidence. That's how I feel about it.
So what you just said, though, Jonah, in a roundabout way, and to be clear, I agree 1,000%. We need to have a podcast of what is truth. How do you actually? That is a fantastic podcast.
You and I need that word. It's got to characterize like all the rest of our conversations.
I think we do 100%. Because now we'll have something to point to. If one of us feels like the other person is saying something idiotic, we can point to whatever we said was the right way. But here's the thing, bro. What you just said indirectly was the same point that I've been trying to make, is that you default trust to the establishment, to the common narrative.
Because they have evidence.
But
until someone provides other evidence, I am going to believe that story.
So but I don't believe that you will. I think you tell yourself that because that feels like the responsible thing to say. Okay. But the reality is you won't.
Do you believe any official story?
No.
You believe none of them?
I don't
Not a single one.
Let me be really clear. I don't believe anything that Yvonne showed me a picture today of something crazy. That was a crazy conspiracy theory. First thing I said was, that looks like bullshit. Is that the same person? Did I not? Crazy conspiracy theory that I would love to believe. And I was like, nah, that's bullshit. My default isn't overt skepticism, just like it's not overt trust. It's what I said was, that looks like bullshit. Can we confirm? My default position is always to ask the question. I require burden of proof just like you do, but I don't just require burden of proof to the outlier. I require burden of proof to anybody trying to get me to buy something, trying to get me to believe a narrative, because me blindly believing anybody is naive on my part. I think that it's responsible for me to question everything that's being presented to me, not in a overly suspicious fashion. I think there is a point where you can become a little bit too callous and just a little bit too, everything, you know what I mean? And you're just kind of a negative person. I don't do it from that perspective, but the perspective I do it from is interesting. Show me more. Because I hear you, but I don't believe you yet. I'd like to believe you if whatever they're telling me is interesting, but if it has an air of whatever, I'm going to ask. We talked about, I didn't want to go into COVID today. I think we should do a whole show surrounding that, because you can't really go.
That's going to require me to do so much research again, but okay.
But we'll have to. But here's what I believe we know. I hear the language. What I believe we know at this point is this: the establishment that you default your trust to, which is the common narrative in the news, told you not only that that thing was trustworthy, but that it was irresponsible, and that you are guilty of endangering those in your life. They didn't lob that casually. They, in our face, basically gaslit us and said, you are a horrible human being and you don't give a fuck about your family members if you don't take this injection. 3 years later, we're finding out that it was overwhelmingly ineffective and drastically more dangerous than it was ineffective.
Okay, so like if I prove, because like I 100% don't agree that it's overwhelmingly ineffective. I will show you the data on how, and you might not believe me, but like about how like infection rates started going down after we released the vaccines.
We can see that. I'm not going to assume you're
into a COVID thing, but the thing is, Quijano, it's like I would just accuse you of the opposite. I don't think you ever believe. I feel like you believe TikToks much more than the official story a lot of the time.
I'll give you an example today where I didn't, because here's what every time. Most people have an agenda.
I'll give you an example where I didn't believe I don't automatically like instantly believe the official story too, right? Like when like I have to think of an example because like I haven't, and I'll honestly I can't think of one off the top of my head, but like Epstein killing himself, that immediately was like, absolute, what the hell? No, that's fucking crazy, right? The official story is he killed himself, but I didn't immediately, that one seemed insane, right? So it gets back to our original problem of like what we're kind of both going off of what we perceive as reality and being more likely to be true than less likely to be true. I think both of us are dealing with that issue. Which most people deal with, but
which I don't disagree with. I think that the idea of questioning your default worldviews it requires intentionality. You got to be intentional. You're not going to default to that very easily.
I'm not going to take on believing yourself, but this is like that stuff where I'm like, where did we get? Like, how did we go from like what we know to it was never meant to create immunity at all, right? That's where I'm like, wait, where did that come from?
We need to get that to a different conversation, right? Like, here's so your default is that you're going to trust the common narrative because you believe that the common narrative.
I'm going to trust the person who shows me evidence in the end. Unless you can show.
The reason you trust the common narrative is because you believe that the reason they put that out is because they have evidence of that, which means it's trustworthy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put it out.
Well, no, I can see the evidence for it. Like I will see whatever they put out. Like if we want to go to COVID specifically, right? Then it's about like when they put out the data. Like, look,
So
COVID
what
is such a
you're
hard one because like nobody knew what the fuck was going on.
So what you're saying is
that's
this is
like a very
trustworthy,
different
right?
one of those.
We can get off COVID. That's a show.
What are we looking at here? Elon
Look at
Musk, my
They
guy.
should do the propaganda more. This is way too obvious. This is what you're telling me is a trustworthy default to follow without questioning for yourself.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as JD Vance.
Super weird idea from JD Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird. Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate are weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird. It's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings, weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was his talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
You ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior.
Weird and cultish.
These are weird people on the other side.
He kind of doubled down on his weird ideas.
I think weird is probably generous.
Simply weird. These guys are just plain weird.
Vance as weird.
You know, as the campaign said, weird.
It really is just plain weird.
JD Vance, plain weird.
I mean, I don't know how else you could read it.
Weird. It is kind of weird.
We're not afraid of weird people.
The other side, they're just weird.
Why are you being so weird?
Vance has done something more extreme, more weird.
No matter what kind of weird stuff they keep saying.
Trump and Vance are just weird, in addition to being dangerous to democracy.
That's the weird part that's the most engaging.
Whom he addressed as my beautiful Christians, which was super weird. Weird tech bro, JD Vance.
He's a weird guy.
JD Vance, uneasy and sort of weird.
Frankly, for lack of a better word, that he's weird.
Sarcastic remarks that aren't even funny, and he kind of shows that he can't really deliver a one-liner.
So, Sam, weird is the word here in terms of initial impressions from Vance.
So nothing weird about that.
You want my opinion on that?
Hold on, I'm gonna show one more, and then I want to hear your opinion on it.
Mine. I think the one that I put in, maybe I'm just biased. That one was weird.
Very interesting. That's profound. That's profound. Let's look at this one. This one is far more
weird.
Exact same thing. It's really. Have you ever seen that video where it shows local news people all saying like the exact same thing? It's really.
Hey, man, why don't we just do this?
Is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are concerned plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media.
This is fucking scary.
Yeah, this is the scariest. Well, that's propaganda. They're trying.
And there it is. You asked
Right.
me, Jonah, why I think it's wise to default the general narrative with skepticism and not acceptance, because I assume that they did their research. The reason I don't is because of that. Because all this tells me is that the air quote conspiracy theorist that asks questions about this may have a point. Because what you're telling me is that everybody on this in this country, right? How long has Vance been a running mate? Less than 2 weeks. And within less than 2 weeks, we have hundreds of examples on dozens of different shows of everybody saying the exact same thing. Here's my 2 questions to you. with that, Jonah. Question number 1. How long does it take for everybody to say the same thing before people just start believing it, whether it's true or not? That's my first question. And I think that's its own topic. But then my second question is, are we really not questioning the concern that all of these news stations across the nation are saying not something similar, verbatim word tracks? What that tells me is, who's typing that up? Who has the power to control a national narrative for hundreds of different reporters on hundreds of different stations? Who has the power to do that? And are you not scared that one person in a room can type up a script and the whole world repeats it? Does that genuinely not concern you, bro? You think that's trustworthy?
Well, so here's the thing. I could do the exact same thing with clips about like Trump. And I could literally put.
Nobody's talking about Trump, bro.
News sources, like, no, give me a second. So, like, of them all being like Trump derangement syndrome, Trump derangement syndrome, Trump derangement syndrome, and everybody just repeating the same words over and over and over again.
Okay.
It goes both ways, where I agree that it's propaganda, right? I'm not saying that certain things aren't propaganda, right? Their propaganda exists. It is a possibility. Now, the question to really ask, in my opinion, is what is propaganda and what is true, right? So my point is that the news, so there are two different issues. The weird thing, I think that's the same as conservatives saying something like Trump, like calling all over and over again people who don't like Trump derangement syndrome. I bet I could do a whole clip of just news anchors doing that, right? I bet I could do that, where they're all repeating each other. So that's not as convincing. The verbatim thing, that video I put in our WhatsApp chat, the full video, right? I told you, I thought that was crazy. And then I started looking into it. I'm going to just give an alternative explanation. And this comes back to Occam's razor, right? Is it not just simpler? And like, this might be that we just agree on this, that what's happening, the issue is not that like elites are trying to control us, but the issue is that our media is owned by like 6 companies. So if one company has a message, right, then they can spread it out, and it literally sometimes would be verbatim telling people what to say, right? And then how do we solve that? Because your thing is like global elites are trying to control all of us. It's like, okay. Or is it that the people who, there's only a few people who own these companies, and that's a problem, and if we just broke it up, then we would be good, right? I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's kind of the same thing of like, okay, so I don't trust them, then who am I then do I trust just anybody on TikTok? In the end, it has to be like, I can do so much research, but who's finding the evidence? And how do I know they're any more trustworthy than the news media, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, I slightly agree with you and I slightly don't. So like, I agree. The issue is that I'm not going to blindly believe them, but Quijano, it sounds like you blindly disagree with them, right? When you say you don't agree with any of the official stories, it's like, okay, well then that means you're blindly disagreeing with them. You think I'm blindly agreeing with them.
No, the language in what you just said doesn't add up. Because one, you are blindly agreeing them. You literally said you default to trust because your assumption.
The person who has evidence.
They put it out. You said your assumption is that if the narrative, the general national news puts it out, it must come with supporting evidence. So you
I never said that. No, that's not what I said. I said when I see evidence for it. Okay, so like, let's take an example. I see on the local news someone was murdered, right? Okay, maybe it's a lie. But they're showing some evidence on the news. So until somebody comes with good competing evidence, I am going to just be like, okay, well, I see that they found the knife. I see the knife. They have film of the knife, right? And then whatever, right? Like, I don't know how to explain it more than that. It's not that I'm defaulting to the news. I'm defaulting to whoever has any evidence for whatever we're claiming to be true.
You did not default to Fauci to prove that the vaccine worked, that it was safe. You trusted blindly.
No,
they had no
evidence. Research.
They
We're gonna have
had
to go
no
back
evidence.
There
They
is
had no
evidence, bro. There is evidence that it gives you resistance, and I will show that evidence.
Evidence in 2020 that thing was safe. Zero. There was. You cannot find me evidence in 2020.
Evidence. They have 9 months of trials, right? Now you can argue whether that's enough to be safe, but there were 9 months of trials done by Pfizer and all of them. You can look up these trials if you want, right? That isn't 100% true. You're right. And we can argue about what's necessary to make a vaccine safe, but we're also dealing with a global pandemic.
You realize that you're trying really hard to avoid the point that I'm making, but in your efforts to avoid it, you keep proving me right. Jonah, you might want to just accept, bro, you trust the establishment by default. And you sometimes question if something is so overwhelmingly questionable to you, you are willing to question it. Yes, I will give you that. I'm not saying you blindly trust everything that's said. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you do, with the exception of the times where it's extremely questionable, default trust to the establishment. And that is one example. They had zero evidence of safety. Zero.
You did not have zero evidence of safety. I'm sorry, dude. They had... 2020, the vaccine wasn't released. So I don't know where to buy. You mean 2021?
Correct.
Yeah. They had 9 months of trials. There was some evidence. It wasn't the best. And you can argue about vaccine effectiveness with 9 months of trials. There's like very valid points at that point, right? COVID is like one of the hardest ones because like you're dealing with a pandemic that's constantly evolving. And like the issue was that the authorities were acting like they 100% knew what they were doing when they didn't 100% knew what they were doing. That was a problem that I agree with.
Decades of efficacy?
Most vaccines? What do you mean? I don't know. What are you saying? For COVID? No. For lots of other things, yes. Not for COVID specifically.
You know what had countless numbers of people of first-hand examples of them being cured of COVID within days of taking ivermectin. Let me ask you a question.
Ivermectin, dude, I don't know the evidence behind ivermectin. Yes, I saw what they were doing with ivermectin and demonizing it. I agree. That was really fucking weird, right? There are certain things that I agree with. Ivermectin is one of them. What I think they were trying to do was probably there were tons of different drugs that were being like explored by just people, right? I'm like, it's so hard for me to remember this. We'd have to do a COVID episode, but I feel like it was another treatment that was like totally shown that wasn't true. And I don't remember it. It's been a while since I've thought about COVID. I wasn't prepared to talk about COVID.
Neither was I. Here's what I think. There's a common thread here that's getting developed that I don't know that you want to see. Guys, if I'm fishing and this is not a common thread, let me know. Why would they all agree with me? It's our podcast. Why would you?
But COVID and shit. This is a conservative. Like this is like a conservative versus like a liberal thing.
All right. Fine. I don't.
I'm cool with
there is truth to that. I'll give you that. But I just, if somebody defend Jonah, if you think that I'm reaching, but I don't think I'm reaching. Here's what I'm noticing in this, Jonah, and I don't think you're willing to acknowledge. And I don't want to make this just about you. It's just you're the guy I'm talking to, right? So I guess you're standing for anybody else to whom this represents. For me, what I'm noticing here is that you are willing intellectually to accept that maybe there is something that is outside of the normal narrative. You're not willing to accept that you default to trusting the common narrative. You are willing to ask for proof, but you rarely ask it of the establishment. And I think that if you asked it of the establishment,
God damn it! Why do you think I don't? Why do you think I don't?
Guys,
wait.
In the
So
chat,
for instance,
if you've been listening in the chat, does Jonah trust the establishment by default, or does he question it like he claims? Right? Number one, right? Say no. How about yes or no? Yes, he trusts the establishment. No, he questions everybody. I want to know. Can you guys give me some answers in the chat?
Here's what I trust. So, okay, here's the issue that we're getting into. I'm going to trust the first thing I'm going to trust. The issue is that the official story almost comes out always before an unofficial story of what's going on.
Define official.
Like the establishment's narrative.
Okay.
Right? So the issue is yes, I'm going to first go with the person who shows me evidence. The issue is generally that's going to be the establishment who shows me the evidence first, right?
Okay.
That's the problem we're dealing with. You're technically, I think, right, but the issue is not. But you're thinking what you're saying is I believe it just because it's the establishment. It's not because it's just because it's the establishment. It's because the establishment provided evidence for this official story, right? So now someone, if there's actually something else that happened, has to provide evidence that's like, wait a minute, this is all bullshit, right? So technically you're right. I'm just going to say that the reason that it's the establishment is because it just happens to be the first person doing evidence. That's how I'll end it. What my decider is not whether it comes from the establishment or not the establishment. My decider is do you have any good fucking evidence for your claim or not, right? That's all I'm going to leave it with.
I don't think that's true because you didn't ask that of the establishment. You assumed that they had it because they were first, because you have to have that to be first. What I'm saying is that you're saying that's the level of scrutiny that you hold it to. What I'm saying is it's not, because you didn't ask that of the establishment when you believed these things.
Like, give me an example, like the COVID vaccine? Are we going to stick to that one?
We've discussed today, literally anything we've discussed today. You're defaulting that because they're the ones that are out there with the common narrative, there must have been supportive research. And I'm just saying there's not.
That's not necessarily true. It depends on what it is. So for instance, the COVID vaccine, when that came out, I was like, okay, we've done these trials. I've researched somewhat into it. I'm not going to lie that I fully deep dive researched into it, but I didn't just be like, okay, I wasn't like, okay, there aren't no side effects to taking this. I did a couple things. I asked my doctor about it, how it's safe. I looked into the research that Pfizer and Moderna did when it came out, right? And it seems safe overall, right? There's some levels of myocarditis. That's true, right? But the issue is the levels, you think it's incredibly ineffective. That's just not true. I can show that in the next episode. It's not incredibly ineffective, right?
Do you think
does it cure it? No. Does it give you 100% immunity? No. Right?
Do you think it's safe?
Yeah, it's safe. You're crazy if you think it's going to make you grow a tail, or it is. The levels of myocarditis are insanely low percentage wise. The thing is, it's very easy to see all of the cases of myocarditis because we're now vaccinating millions, billions of people. So when you're in the billions and then a couple thousand get myocarditis, you're dealing with 0.1%. The thing is, yes, over 7 billion people, or however many people, 3 billion, however many got vaccinated. If you have a 0.1% thing, that's thousands. That might even be tens of thousands, because a billion is such a huge number. So the issue is the level of proportion of things, for instance, with the vaccine, right? So no, it is definitely a safe one, and we can argue about it on a podcast at some point. But
okay, this is perfect. I think you're bringing up a fantastic point. Prove that it's safe. What examples can you prove to me based on the evidence or the research that you've done that it's safe?
Well, define what's safe to you first. Like, is it 0% side effects? Is it what? Like, to me, 0.1% of myocarditis is safe. What is safe to you first?
You're
Define
the only
that.
one talking about myocarditis, to be clear.
Okay, what do you think are the side effects? Like,
No,
like define your question more.
You're literally deflecting. You're answering a question with a question. I'm
trying to
asking
understand your question.
no, my question is very, very clear. You have been telling me for the last hour that you don't, by default, trust the establishment, that you think it's responsible to do research. You keep denying to me that I know that when that's your default when I tell you that that's your default, but then you just did it again. You're telling me you're trusting the establishment and the generalized news without doing your own research. So my question is,
How do you get that from what I just said?
What information have you researched to prove that it's safe?
I have looked at the levels of the side effects and how the studies that they've done on it, and like how often does myocarditis occur? How often does
talking about myocarditis like there's only one negative side effect?
What side effects are you talking about? That's the most prevalent one.
A person who's done the research that you're saying that you have done would know all of the potential side effects.
All right, my guy. What is the most prevalent side effect?
That's not what I'm asking you, right? What I'm asking you is this. Now you're Googling. You are claiming.
I'm Googling because I'm trying to understand, because you're not going to answer you're not going to help. You're asking a question that you need to define what you mean by safe. So do you mean less than 1% of side effects? Do you mean that, what does that mean? Like, I want to answer your question right, is what I'm trying to do. Right? That's what I'm trying to I'm trying to understand your question. Safe is a very vague term. If you think that you could say, hey, Jonah, right? There are tens of thousands of cases of myocarditis. How could you possibly think this is safe? And then my answer to you is, well, it's actually incredibly safe for most people because it's really like 0.1% or something like that. I have to remember, I did this in 2020. So I wasn't expecting to talk about COVID. But over a couple billion people, that's going to show up in tens of thousands. So what do you mean by safe? That is the research I did to answer your question. That's the research to say that I did that it's safe. Now, I'm assuming there's some other research you're about to show me that I'm wrong, right? And I'm willing to be wrong. But this is the research that I did, right? So I don't know. I don't know if we're at an impasse there. But that's
we're not at all at an impasse, right? All I'm going to say is that I don't want to call you evasive because I don't think you're intentionally being evasive. I just don't think you realize you're being evasive, because what you have said is that you don't trust the establishment by default. Yet you're telling me that this thing is safe and you've done no research to prove that it's safe, which means that you're assuming it's safe because the establishment told you that it's safe.
I haven't done research that it's safe.
Because the only thing that you've referenced as a potential frame of reference for it being dangerous is myocarditis, which is fine. But my question to you is, let me not assume. Have you done thorough research at any point to confirm whether or not this, in fact, is safe and has no negative side effects worth being concerned about by the masses? Have you done extensive research on it?
I did it when the vaccine was being released initially. If there's more research that's come out since then, I haven't, because that was when I was deciding whether to do the vaccine or not. But what I'm wondering is your claim that I blindly believe the establishment.
You're telling me that you believe it's safe, but in the last 3 years, you've done nothing to confirm whether or not that's true. So you're believing it's safe because of what?
Because of the research I did in 2021. If there is research, and you're right, if there is research that shows I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But you're assuming it's because it's from the establishment's point of view. And I'm telling you it's because of the research I did. You can say it's because of old research, but it's not because I blindly believe in the establishment.
Here's my
assertion. All I'm saying. We're going in like circles here.
We are. So here's my takeaway assertion. And we will let the people decide, bro. My assertion is that you default your trust to the establishment. You make everybody who disagree with them prove it. You are quick to say prove it if I bring you a, quote, conspiracy theory. You're quick to say prove it if I present to you something that's differing from the common narrative. I never hear you say prove it when it comes out on the news. And that's my point.
I gave you an example. Epstein killing himself. That was bullshit. I was like, that is that what the fuck? Like, no, right?
Goes back to my previous point. So never is an unfair statement. I should have said rarely, because what I said previously was that you will, if it's so overtly, I guess, I don't know, curious, or, you know, it's just obvious that there's something wrong about the situation. In that situation, I think you're intelligent enough that you'll question it. But as a general rule, I believe you default to trusting the establishment. And I think that that's your prerogative. I don't think that you're a bad person by doing that. I think it's ignorant. I think it's naive. And I don't mean that as an attack. I mean that by the definition of the phrase, right? I don't think that I default to questioning everything. I don't think you can default. I think you can, to a degree, just default to being a cynic. But I just think that I intentionally just question everything before I accept it to be true. I think that that's the smarter way to live in the society in which we live, because access to information is plentiful. The ability to vet it, to your point, is time consuming, which means it becomes really, really convenient and easy to just believe whatever you're told. And I don't think that because it's on a popular news station that increases the level of trust. I believe most people in our society do. I think most people in our society believe that because it's on a common popular news outlet, it must be trustworthy. I think that's naive. I think the two clips that we just showed prove that it's naive. And I think you're unwilling to admit that you also believe that partially.
I do believe that. I do believe that you shouldn't necessarily immediately believe the establishment. You just believe I don't believe it, which is fine. It's whatever. Like, it's all good. To be fair to you, do I have a tendency to believe the news? It's hard for me to say. I'd have to think about it, because I don't even get my news from ABC and CNN and stuff like that. I usually get them from podcasts, which is probably even worse, right? To be honest.
I don't know that I would say worse necessarily.
See, like, why? Why would podcasts be any better? That's what I'm curious about, Keanu. The issue for me is like, yes, you make some good points about the mainstream media, but at the same time, why is it any better if it's on a podcast? In the end, right? In the end, the only differentiating thing in the end is there evidence for the claim, or is there not evidence for the claim, right? I don't have time to look into everything. I really look into the ones that really affect me or I think are important. That's why I did the research into Trump, because I think that one's really important. I did the research into COVID because I was deciding whether I actually should take this vaccine or not when I was deciding to take it in 2021. So I just went off the best evidence I possibly could, right? So I don't know. I just would say, like, that's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm not going to believe something as much unless there's evidence for it, or it comports to something that I already know, right? Which everyone does. You can say that's just me, but I think literally every single person.
I think it's a natural thing for people to do.
Where it's like, okay, it makes sense that inflation went up when interest rates were dropped to 2.2%. I don't think that's a nefarious plot. That totally makes sense in my mind because I've studied economic theory. That was like what my college degree was in, right? That makes sense. I've studied that a lot because of it, right? So when then I hear somebody say like, oh no, like this is a purposeful thing from the global elites in order to cause inflation and destroy the middle class. And I'm like, no, this is economics. This is what they were trying to do, right? I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you of this, that it depends on if there's something that already comports to what I already know to be true as well, which is with COVID, it's like, that's such a hard one. I think COVID is such a unique example where you can find so many times where they were lying. It would be interesting to take this into other places too. We're at like, what are we at, dude? We're at like 2 hours.
We can wrap here. Yeah, we're a little over, but I think you're right. I don't think I mean, I know Birdie brought up COVID, and I think that is a conversation that deserves its own episode. It became a frame of reference. I agree with you that it's probably not the fairest frame of reference because I think fear at that scale is a fantastic way to manipulate and gaslight people, and I think that's what happened. I think that maybe in a less emotionally charged and, obviously dangerous situation, it's easier for us to be able to potentially have conversations around neutrality towards information. I think the message that I'm trying to get across here, and I don't think this is for you. I don't think you do this as much as you think you do. I could be wrong. But I think that as a humanity, as a population, we just need to get better at questioning things. Right? I think the idea of questioning information, I think it's safe. I think it's responsible. You know, and I think that it's also demonized. I think it is extremely easy today to call anybody who questions things a conspiracy theorist. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's a political thing. I think it was until Trump's assassination attempt. And then all of a sudden that became, it used to be only people who were conspiracy theorists, were far right, QAnon, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, now the assassination attempt is a setup and it's a hoax. Okay, cool. What that tells me is that flat earthers ain't the only people who question the common narrative. We question the narrative only when we don't like what it says. And I don't think that that's the right method of approach. I don't think that the only time you should question what you're being told is when you vehemently disagree with what you're being told. That's natural. You're going to do that anyways. I think you should question what's being told if it's in your best interest to be clear about what you're believing. And I think that's always. I think we should always want to be clear as to what we're believing. And I think that when it comes to what's safe in our food, we should do our own research. Here's the thing. We live in a world that we shouldn't trust, bro. The same doctors that told us that over-the-counter foods were completely safe, those same foods with red dye number 30 and blue dye number 48 and all these different dyes are banned in other countries because of their overwhelming health concerns. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden, 2 weeks ago, we were discussing whether or not he was an obvious medical decline. You agreed that he wasn't. He had a bad showing. The whole world believed that he wasn't. He had a bad showing. You know what the news was telling us for 4 years? That he wasn't. He just had a bad showing. And then he stepped down because of obvious health issues. Now, the same people who told us that Biden was fine, even though he stepped down a week later, are telling us that Kamala Harris is capable. When are we going to stop believing what we're being told? The fact that Biden stepped down isn't demonstrative of the fact that he had a steep decline in a week, bro. It's because he had a problem for a long time that they were hiding from us. They finally just admitted it. So the same people that told us Biden was healthy tells us that Kamala's capable. My question is whether you believe it or not, I don't care. My question is stop believing it just because they tell you, right? You yourself worked at a place that admittedly was creepy. You worked at Bohemian Grove, bro. There was weird stuff going on there. We saw firsthand weird stuff. If you ask anybody who was there, they'll tell you it's completely normal. What that tells me isn't that we know what's going on there. I think you could do the research and find out what's going on there. I think that information is available. But I think that right now I would be content with you establishing the idea that, you know what? Here's my common takeaway. Your common takeaway, what you've been presenting, and I'll let you speak for yourself. But the thing you've been presenting is, you know, evidence and all these different things. I'll let you speak for yourself. I'm not going to speak for you. Here's my takeaway here. A very common place called the Bohemian Grove that everybody tells us is completely normal has some weird, creepy shit going on. The news that we believe is completely trustworthy is clearly overwhelmingly scripted and is coming from one very small source. That same source is the same people that controls everything else on our planet. There is a narrative that's being told to us that benefits not us. It benefits probably the select few. My question is, why are we so comfortable just believing what we're told? I don't know what you should believe. I'm not qualified to tell you what you should believe. But I think I'm qualified to say that you should question what you believe and stop just blindly believing what they're dishing out to you. And here's the final point that I'll make. I think, Jonah, I think that if you or anybody starts questioning what they're being told, how they view the world starts changing drastically. How you view this presidential election will change drastically. How you view the candidates and what we're told to believe about the candidates will start changing drastically. I think the thing that you'll see you believe about the world that we live in today changes when you start filtering what you believe, when you start asking questions about what you're being told. The problem is we just don't ask questions.
Okay.
That's my biggest takeaway. That's my biggest takeaway.
I think
Question.
it's a good takeaway. Yeah, I mean, like, I generally agree it's good to question things, right? I just think it gets crazy sometimes. And it's like, do we have like any evidence for like any of this? That's my hard thing where it's like, okay, yes, the news lies. Yes, they're all owned by like only a handful of corporations. That's all true. So then all their messaging is the same, right? They're mostly liberal. So it ends up being somewhat towards like a liberal bias, right? Because we all have biases. It's when people go an extra step is my issue, where it's like, okay, now we're going crazy. Like, how do we know this? Like, okay, so X, Y, and Z, yes, we should question the narrative, and therefore the vaccines give you a tail, right? Like, I've had someone say that to me before. It's like, I'm not gonna have a fucking tail grow out of my ass from a vaccine. I'm not kidding you. That has been told to me before by a friend of mine. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? The issue that I have, right, is you're not wrong, Keanu, but then people go crazy and are like, and therefore I'm going to believe the craziest shit ever. And it's like, okay, hold on.
Define crazy. Tail's crazy?
Yes, that's insane.
Okay.
That you would grow a tail from having the vaccine, right? That's one. So I guess that's just my issue with the whole thing. I don't think it's bad to question. I think you probably are right that I should question the establishment more than I do, right? Like, I think you might have a point there. My worry is then you start believing things that are obviously not true. I'm not saying you're going to say that you grow a tail from having the vaccine, obviously, right? But there is a certain point where it's like, what? Like, okay. We're gonna go with that.
I'm going to bring up a point, and I know this is going to take us off track. I'm going to try to make it really, really quick. But
Yeah, we should. I'll like make this point, and then we're in this.
This is an equivalent, right? So a lot of you guys know, and how do I say this with being respectful? I was in ministry for a long time, right?
So disrespectful.
I know, right? No, I'm getting to the point where people are going to be offended. One of the ministries I was involved in had an issue with the leaders in the church drinking alcohol. Now, if you understand scripture, then you understand why this is a debated topic. There are some belief systems in Christianity that say drinking is a sin. There are other beliefs that say, no, it's not. Having an alcohol problem and getting so overwhelmingly inebriated that you have no control over yourself, that's when it becomes the issue. It's not an issue of the alcohol. It's the issue of the control. I can tell you as a guy who studies scripture a lot, scripture does not support alcohol being a sin. It just doesn't. Anybody who wants to go to toe-to-toe with me on this, schedule it. We'll do it on a podcast. You will not win. I promise. Jesus' first miracle.
You won't win. I'll bring the Old Testament, right? Dude. You're supposed to be drinking wine all the time.
We could do both of them. But that being said, that's irrelevant. There was a ministry I was a part of, and I was a leader in this ministry. And it was not a small ministry necessarily. And so one of the head people in the ministry called a bunch of the gentlemen who would drink publicly, and they would say, hey guys, you guys need to stop doing that. It sets a bad example to people. So my response was, and I wasn't the only person with this response, but I'll speak for myself. My response was, what do you mean? They said, but you're like, when you do that, you give people the impression that it's okay. My response was, but scripture does say it's okay. Scripture does not say that there's an issue with alcohol. There's an issue with being controlled by alcohol, by not having self-control and all of the things that come with that. And their response was, yeah, but they may not know that. So them seeing you do that could make them go off the deep end and get excessive. I said, I hear you. So I said, so what's the alternative? They said, just do it privately. I said, okay, that's called being a hypocrite. That's called doing something different in public that I do in private. They said, yeah, but if they don't know what you're doing, they're not going to be able to, they may not understand what you understand. My response was, well, isn't it our responsibility to teach them? Fear of people having a hard time processing knowledge is not a justification for us to operate in ignorance. Knowledge is powerful. Knowledge can open up the door to all kinds of scary things. But the fact that that's real should not be an excuse to avoid educating ourselves altogether, because some people may stumble in their pursuit of knowledge. And I think that inadvertently, that's what you're saying. The willingness to be open to educating ourselves to seemingly outlandish ideas could open up the door to all kinds of crazy belief systems. But fear of that possibility isn't a big enough excuse for us to live in ignorance. Knowledge is power, but it's also a responsibility. And I think that it is our responsibility, irrespective of the fears or the downfalls or the dangers associated with researching and obtaining knowledge. The fears that are associated shouldn't stop us from doing it, right? We can't use that as an excuse to live in ignorance. We have to pursue knowledge, even if the cost is danger. That's just my opinion.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't say don't question things. And I'll just leave it at that. I get your point, but I'm tired as hell. So like, I want to wrap this up.
Let's do it. You're gone for the next 2 weeks, right?
I am. I'm not going to be, I don't think I'm going to be on the podcast because I'm going to be in Iceland with my dad traveling around, which is going to be sick. It's going to be so fun. I'm super excited for it. Yeah, so we should get a you want to guest co-host? We could find someone to replace me.
I don't know what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks. If you guys have ideas, if you guys want to be a part of the conversation, we could. I mean, I could talk to a camera for an hour. I'm sure I could run my mouth.
Yeah, but it's more fun when you and me are yelling at each other, right? So like the most boring podcast we did was when you were sick, right?
That's because your personality kind of sucks.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Jonah, all jokes aside, bro, none but love and respect to you, dog, because we come from completely different schools of thought, and we still manage to navigate weird freaking conversations that are completely off the spectrum, and we always come back to a good place. If nothing else is learned from this podcast and people think we're completely stupid, hopefully people can take that away, that you should be able to still think highly of people who have completely outlandish thoughts in your opinion and speak and discuss things respectfully. So big respect for you for always staying on that side of things, man. I genuinely appreciate that.
To you as well, brother. To you as well. Okay. We will figure out what's going to happen next week. We'll figure it out. We'll find someone to replace me. But yeah, I'm ready to wrap this up when you are.
Guys, hopefully you had a good time tonight. Hopefully you enjoy our random conversations that we've been getting into these last couple of weeks. We'll probably get into lighter stuff eventually, but if not, who cares? We're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. And you guys are welcome to come and be a part of the conversation. If you did like any part of this conversation, tell your friends, have them watch it. If you thought it was stupid, DM us and tell us we're stupid and tell us what we said, what part of what we said was stupid. If you guys have ideas for the next coming weeks, will I be out here by myself? If you want to jump on here, let me know. But let's continue to have dope conversations and challenge each other and challenge ideas and talk about crazy stuff and see what happens.
I love it.
Okay.
All right.
Jonah, I appreciate you, bro. We'll miss you over the next couple of weeks. Love you, man. Everybody else, we appreciate you guys. See you next week.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Otherwise, you're a loser. We're out.